Hello again, and good time to you, dear students of the 3D Max course. I hope you had a good time and did some exercises and are ready for the 6th session of the 3D Max training program. Well, we gave a series of explanations, and in this session, I will say a small point, and then we will show you some of the modifiers available in 3D Max, just so that you can get familiar with the modifiers and know how the modifier is applied and how to work with them. And we will also work with some of the modifiers so that you can get familiar. Well, the first point is that in every system we work with, and in every software we work with, we need to know what scale we are entering the measurements on, or if we want to change the scale, we need to know how to change it. In this main bar and in the Customize section, we have a Unit Setup section. And when you click on Unit Setup, this Unit Setup window will open for you. And you can determine what system you want to work with in the Unit Scale Display section. If you want metric or standard, or even if you want to define a system for it, and tell it what number and value each unit you enter is equal to, you can determine it here. Well, in the metric section, there are millimeters, there are centimeters, there are meters, and even kilometers, which you can use meters or centimeters, or if it comes in the second part, you will see that different units of inches and feet, etc., are written for you. And you can use them if you are familiar with them or are interested. You can also adjust the bottom to be on feet or inches. And in the Custom section, you can also enter a size yourself. We usually use the Metric section and put it on meters or centimeters. If you want to do more delicate work, for example, you might make furniture or do industrial design, well, basically, you should use millimeters or centimeter. And if you want to work in architectural work and with standard sizes, there are meters. And in very large work that you need to do, you can even use kilometers or meters. Well, the metric system is usually the system that is more practical and is used more for us, and we use this metric system. So we put it on meters. Well, that's okay. So whenever you want to create a box, you can see that the parameters are in meters. This is from the Units section. So I want to create a box in the scene, and I want to increase the number of segments. I enlarge my scene and hit F4 and increase the number of segments and increase the size a little. Well, the segments may have increased a little. The same 5 or 4. Of course, the same 5 is enough. So we want to make some changes to this shape using the Modify section. When you hit Modify, The first thing up there is the name of the volume that you created, or that shape, or whatever you created in the scene. And you see the shape there. And you can change its color, for example. I will tell you how to name it later, but for now, I will put it here on box 201. And the color here, you can set any color you want. For example, this color. And in the parameters section, there are parameters that are given to you, and you can apply changes to them. In this section, that is in the middle, and these few options that are below it. You have options that you can use for modifiers. When we open this drop-down list, inside this drop-down list, we see that there are categories of types of modifiers or modifiers that we can apply to shapes in the scene, each of which has its own characteristics. And I will work on a few of them here for you to test and sample, and you should try the ones that I practice with. You should also work and try to get familiar with these modifiers and see how you can work with them. With these modifiers that we teach, try to do a series of exercises, and you will almost get used to working with the modifier window. So the first modifier that we will work with is bend. Look, I'm going to close this modifier list and open the modifier list again. First, if you know the modifiers and their names, just enter their first letters. When you enter the first letter, it will bring up the ones that start with that letter. For example, I'm playing the band. So when I play the band, it shows me the band here, and there's an I next to it and an arrow. What does this I mean? Meaning you can either turn this off or let it apply to your volume. This triangle and this arrow also show us the subsets of the bend. Well, now you can also see in the lower part that you can see the bend parameters. As I apply these modifiers, keep in mind that we created a box and then we created a bend. And everything and every modifier that we apply comes on top of these. Well, the bend parameters are one in the bend section itself. It has an angle and a direction. I change the angle, and you see it's changing my volume. And I change the direction, and you see it's applying my changes. Keep in mind that if you create a box that doesn't have segments, the bend is not applied at all, because these segments are like bones that give flexibility to your volume. So this second part is the axis band that determines the axis of the band for us. And in the limit section, you apply a limit to the top and bottom of this band. If we apply the limit effect, in the top section, we can say where this band starts and how far up it goes, and where it starts at the bottom. And you can see, and you can notice that in the modifier section, there are numbers with up and down arrows next to them. I left-click on them and hold them. And I move the mouse up and down. See, when I move the mouse down, it starts coming from the top again. And if you pay attention to my mouse, you will notice that my mouse is constantly moving from the bottom to the top and back again. That is, I am increasing and decreasing the number like this. And I am also holding the left mouse button down. So if I come to right-click on it, it goes back to 0 and 0. I'll set all the numbers to their default numbers. So I'll do the angel and remove this limit. I said that this eye hides the bend, meaning it stops being applied and then applies it again. You see, when I remove the eye, it goes back to its previous state, but it left the bend state for us. What is that? Bend has two subsets. One is the gizmo and the other is the center. The gizmo is the orange lines that surrounded the shape. So what can we do by selecting it? We can change it with transforms, rotations, scaling, and displacements. Now, since it's not applied, its changes cannot be seen. I've just selected the gizmo. It's blue, and I can change the gizmo. You can see that it's completely dependent on that gizmo. What is the center? The center of this band is applied. You see that I am changing the center. Well, that's enough for the band. I will also say a shortcut here. Every modifier that you apply, its subsets are placed as shortcuts for you with numbers. Every modifier that you apply is activated when you click on it. See now the active box. Now I click on the band and the band turns blue, which means it is active. And when it is active, you know that, for example, the band has two subsets, one gizmo and two centers. You can activate these subsets before you open this and click here by just pressing the 1 key or by pressing the 2 key. See, when I press 1, the gizmo is activated, and I don't have to go there and click, and I can do my work in the scene. Or if I press 2, the center is activated again, and now if I press 2 again, the band is activated. If I press 1 and press 1 again, the band is activated. So with 1 gizmo and 2 centers if it's open, 3, 4, and 5, which we'll have in the future, and you'll see these. So if I hit a gizmo and a face again, it goes to the bend. And now if the bend is closed and I hit a face, now the gizmo is active. But how can I tell which modifier I have that's active? There's a blue line drawn around it. So I'll deselect the gizmo and the next modifier I can introduce to you is noise. By pressing the N button, I brought up the noise and applied the noise here to my shape. Keep in mind that we applied a noise to that box that was applied using the bend method. And now we applied the noise, and the noise also has an eye and 2 subgroups that, like the bend, have a gizmo and a center, which I won't explain anymore, and it's clear what I mean. So we're seeing the gizmo in the scene. There's a noise section that has seed and scale and fractal mode that if you are familiar with it, you can work with it. but you apply the noise in the strength section. See that in the X direction, I move it up and X. You can see the displacement changes in the shape. Now I'm going to play with number. 1 in X and 1 in Y. And 1 in Z. So you see that it created a noise and a volumetric roughness in our volume. Noise is usually known in 3D Max with the maps and those shapes that have a black and white state. And you consider that the black state is the bottom part and the white state is the top part, meaning the roughness that is seen with black and white on a page. And you see here too, for example, this part that has gone down should be black. And this part that has gone up was white, which created this state. And if I change the scale, you see that the amount of this noise is visible. Now, I won't mess up the form too much. So this is the noise that we applied to the seeing. So, let me give a brief explanation here. What would happen if we applied the noise first and then applied the bend? For example, I'm deleting this bend. Sorry, I deleted the volume. For example, I'm removing the eye of this bend. See, if we just wanted to apply noise to that volume of ours, we had something like this. Now, if I apply the band to this, see the changes to that volume for me look like this. And it's different from what we made in the previous series. So it makes a difference in what order you work in. Sorry, I have to move this band above this. Well, you see, I dragged and moved it and moved it up by dragging it. I just wanted to point out here that the order in which you apply the modifiers will affect the quality of your final volume. So after this, we apply a lattice. What does the lattice do? It just leaves you with those segments of the shape and eliminates the volume. And you can also specify that those segments are just points. That is, these diamonds that are at this corner, or just edges. We call these points vertices, and we call the sides edges. Here you can specify whether only the vertices should remain, or only the sides should remain, or both should remain. And in each, you can see that it has its own settings. These settings are only related to the sides, and these settings are only related to the points and joints, whose shape you can determine, and its radius, or its segments and the material ID. We have nothing to do with it for now, and we will explain it to you later. In the material section, or later in the poly edit section, we will explain this material ID. Well, if I wanted to give an explanation of these in cases where you are not familiar and have just encountered it, well, it's nothing and you can work with these. Radius, which is obviously that, and segment, which you've already met, and the amount of those lines that can be added to it. and side, which is now on 4. Meaning if it's on a rectangular shape because its side is on 4, and you can put at least 3 or as many as you want. I'll explain the material ID later. This hidden edge, as I said, is also these lines that are diagonally placed between these. And you can have them. If you want to have them, you have to uncheck this. And end cap, I'll just leave this joint on edge for a moment. Well, if you pay attention, the top and bottom. The top and bottom of these are open, which are called caps. And you can close them with end caps. And smooth will soften these shapes for you and make them circular and close to a circle. You can check or uncheck the boxes. The bottom also has smoothness, and if it is in both mode, you will also see in the joint that its shape mode has tetra, etc. And radius, segment, material ID, and smoothness, which we had above. The coordinate map is also related to the material, and we will explain it in its own section. Well, this is also from the lattice, which, if you pay attention, has no subsets, and you can just remove it from the application and put it back in. Because the time has almost passed, I have another modifier called taper, and we can also have twist. Twist also rotates for you, and the rotation axis and that limit that we had in the bend section. We will also see very quickly that the taper, for you, or if you change the axis. In the other axis, it does this opening and shrinking for you. And you can even curve these sides of the gizmo. And another modifier that you can work with, that you should work with to get to know it, is FFD. Of course, we'll work with FFD a lot later, but I'll just give a small introduction here. FFD has different types: 2x2, 3x3, 4x4, and box and cycle, which are circular shapes. I'm working on a 2x2 shape. You can see that there are 2 on each side. It has options for you to put or take away the lattice, or put or take away the source volume, and other parts that are the most important part of FFDs are in this subsection section. You see that it has 3 subsections, the most important of which I will work with and introduce to you here are the control points, which are these points that exist in each section. And when you select that control point, or press the number 1 key on the keyboard, you can select any of these, that is, any of these points, and make changes to the horizon. And you will see that those changes will also be made to your volume. It is not very difficult to work with it. You can even grab it and scale it or even rotate it. You see that some of the things that we used to do with twist and taper can be done much more easily with FFD. Let me go down, and now what we did with the taper. See, I can make this smaller, open it up, or do whatever else I want with it. So, try to work with these modifiers to the extent that we worked and get familiar with them. I just wanted you to get a general introduction to the stack modifier. and know how it is applied and why it is important to have them up and down. What are their shortcuts? And how many options are there down here that I will explain to you in due time? Of course, there is no special problem. The first is for pinning the stack, which locks your stack. The second is for showing the show and result, the on-off toggle which shows it. Of course, let me give you an example very easily. For example, we have applied a lot of modifiers to our box here, and if this is off, it means that this show and result is off. And if I come from the last modifier I applied, for example, noise, and want to work on the noise, you will see that it returns to the noise mode and does not show the other modifiers that were applied up to the top, and I cannot see the final result. If I want to work only on the noise, I turn this off. And if I want to see the result that I applied to the noise, or in the lower stages, I have to turn on this show and result. Here I can change the noise and see the result in general. Well, the third option is Make Unique, which I will explain in its place. If you want to delete the modifier from here, click on it and click this Remove Modifier from the stack. The Configure Modifier set will also be explained later. These are a few options. They were more important options. This part of the mic Unicom has an important point that I will explain in the next session. I'm sorry, I think this session got a little long, but it was worth it. I hope you are successful in moving towards your own progress with energy and strength.